Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Algonquin Highlands is located on Treaty 20 Mishi-Saugig territory and in the traditional territory of the Mishi-Saugig and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We also acknowledge a historical shared presence of other Indigenous nations throughout the area. We recognize these original Indigenous inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Could I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda for today, please? Councillor Shortreed, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved that the November 17th, 2022 council meeting agenda be approved as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof today? Councillor, go ahead.
On agenda item 10, C, schedule.
Okay. Pardon me?
Need to state why.
Oh, you have to state your reason why.
The canoe rentals, I also rent canoes at the marina.
Okay, thank you. I believe there's a form that you have to sign with Dawn after. Thank you for that. No remarks today other than to welcome everyone to the new council's first official meeting. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of both October the 13th and October the 27th? Councillor Berry, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Berry, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that council approves the October 13th regular council and October 27th special meeting minutes as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. We have no public meetings today and no delegations. So the next item on the agenda is building and bylaw enforcement. So we'll bring in our CBO, Mr. Moore. Good morning, Greg.
Morning, Mayor and Council.
How are you this morning?
I'm perfect.
Of course you are. If you'd like to take us through your monthly activities.
Yes, nothing out of the ordinary last month. I do have my bylaw officer is away on training right now. I'd like to welcome our new deputy building official, Jeff Lewis. Bylaw coming up this month. And other than that, the basic construction permits, looks like we have another 4 million in building and 26,000 in fees. So another good month.
Good work. Are there any questions for Greg on his monthly activity report? Well, that was short and sweet. All right, so we will see the bylaw to appoint Jeff towards the end of the meeting. Thanks, Greg.
Perfect, thank you.
Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive Greg's report? Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved that council acknowledge receipt of the building bylaw report BLDG 1422 submitted by Greg Moore and dated November 17th, 2022 for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is Parks, Recreation and Trails. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
So if you'd like to take us through your monthly activity report.
Yes, so the month of October, of course, is all about fall colors at the Dorset Tower, as well as getting things prepared on our trail systems and our ski trails for the winter ski season. As council knows, this year was the first time we tried a advanced ticket entrance system at the tower, and I'm very happy to say that it went fantastically. We ran it on 4 weekends, which are all the major color weekends, fall color weekends, and what we saw was a much better spread of when people show up, rather than having large groups kind of show up in the prime 11 to 1 category timeline. We had people spread out throughout the day, which really reduced the amount of traffic issues on the highway. So a very big thank you to staff and everyone that was involved, and the OPP and the people ready staffing that we hired, who all did a fantastic job throughout this entire thing. And I look forward to keeping up with this system next year, and hopefully expanding on it and learning from some things we had happen this year. Ski trails, getting through clearing those, and we're in very good shape. The Moose Trail, which we received the donation for from the ski friends and family members of the late Ani Lilep recently, we've got the work done there, and we're in good shape, and glad to see snow falling, and hope that more comes, and we'll have a great season there.
Are there any questions for Chris on his monthly activity report? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the report? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved that council receives report PRT 2622 regarding monthly activity submitted by Chris Card and dated November 17th, 2022.
All in favor? That's carried. Next on your list of items is the Yoxtown Lake Community Center update. Are there any comments or anything you'd like to bring to our attention, either yourself or Councillor Dayu?
I don't have anything specifically, thank you.
Are there any questions on those minutes? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the minutes? Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved, the council receives the October 17th, 2022 Yoxtown Lake Community Center Committee meeting minutes.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is your proposed fee changes. If you'd like to take us through any significant changes there.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll just run through the list of changes, and then through you, Mayor, if there's any questions from there. In general, a 3% increase on all fee categories across the board. I've added some in the ski category. We've increased slightly above that 3% rate to be more in line with what similar municipalities and volunteer clubs in the area are offering for costs, as well as added some categories in the seasons pass rates, adding a seniors category. I've added advertising fees in our ski brochure. This is something we've been doing throughout the time that we've been managing the ski trails. Is our ski brochure has advertising spaces available in it. This is not something that's been reflected in the fees bylaw previously, so I've added information relative to that. I've added some rental replacement and repair fees for both ski and snowshoe rentals, as well as canoe rentals. This allows us to we take a damage deposit from people when they get rentals, and if there's any damage to equipment, typically what happens with canoes in the past is we take them in and have that damage assessed, and then that amount gets taken off of that person's damage deposit. We're now in a position to be able to do some of that work ourselves, so standardize some of those fees and just streamline that. I've added a promotional merchandise category, which would apply to any of the promotional merchandise that we sell at the tower, as well as the trails office. Snowball fees for buttons moving from $4 to $5, which gets us closer to our recovery targets for that event. We've also added a children under 2 entrance free to the snowball. And we have removed an early bird soccer rate for the soccer program. Our soccer, this will help get us closer to cost recovery targets when we're seeing an increase in operating fees. It's not something that gets a lot of uptake, and we're still quite far below for our regular fees relative to nearby municipalities. Finally, at the tower, council will recall the report and discussion around bus fees earlier in the year. So those are reflected in this fee update going into next year. And that's it.
Thank you. Before we have any discussion, and my apologies, Councillor Richards, you should leave the room. So are there any questions or comments that council would like to make on the fee schedule? We'll start with Councillor Barry.
Large document. Just in regards to the family pass for the ski trails. I know you said you're trying to bring it more in line with the other ski opportunities in the surrounding areas. It just seems like that's a really big jump, even with alignment, especially when some of our other rec centers aren't in operation at the current moment. That's the one fee that I sort of wonder if until we're back in business with the rec center programming, if that's necessary to be that big of a hike. It's far above the 3% across the board.
Any comments on that, Chris?
You're absolutely right. It is a big jump. Our costs for operating ski trails, as well as costs for anything, are increasing significantly. It is a big one-time jump, but we were starting quite low when we were inheriting this system and this kind of fee structure from the Ski Friends relative to what other places are doing. This is still less than half of what neighboring areas are doing. Certainly open to feedback on adjusting that somewhat, but it does align with the adult rate as well, which is increasing relative to that. And essentially, if you were to be, 2 adults and 2 youth, it's still quite a big discount over buying those individual passes or paying each time you ski. We do have capital expenses and asset management plan related expenses that, for example, ski trail grooming equipment and replacement of snowmobiles and those types of things, that this will allow us to take some of that revenue and put more into our reserves over time to support those forecasted expenses. But certainly open to feedback on that.
Any comments or thoughts on Councillor Barry's suggestion? Go ahead, Councillor Deputy Mayor Dayuk.
Thanks. My thinking was very much in line with Councillor Barry's. I appreciate very much the rationale and the benefits of the increase, but I found it to be a hard lump to swallow on those 2 lines, on the family pass and on the adult pass. And I think I'd be more comfortable with a more of an incremental increase on that fee if council supports that.
Councillor Berry?
Part of my thinking too is if you know, if you're saving money to buy your pass, I don't know when these would actually go into place, but if it's for this season, that's not much lead up time to pay the difference if you're, you know, if you're tight for money.
Councillor Shortreed?
Chris, do you sell a lot of family passes?
Typically somewhere between 25 and 80. Or sorry, that's total passes. Family passes would be 10 to 20% of that on average.
Not many.
I hear the concern. I just, you know, listening to what Chris has got to say about where it stands relative to other areas that we're still, you know, far below the fee. Although I get what Councillor Berry's saying about it's a big jump kind of just before the season starts. So any more thoughts on that, or is it your desire as a group to see that those two fees reduced a bit? Go ahead, Ms. Bird.
The fees come into play January 1. So there is opportunity for families to purchase at the reduced rate before that date. If council.
Well, there's another thought that as long as we, you know, advertise that well and let people know that that's the case, that, you know, maybe we can talk to Chad about getting something on the website to let people know that, you know, the advanced sales will be a saving. So what is your preference? Would you want to take that into consideration? You want to reduce the fees? Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Thank you. I still feel fairly strongly about reducing the fee somewhat. I think if we aren't seeing a large volume of passes sold every year, then the absolute improvement on the reserve is actually going to be fairly small for the municipality. But for the people enjoying those spaces, where there aren't a ton more options out there for low cost activities, I would prefer to support those individuals in our community who might struggle throughout this winter. This is a hard slog. Their poverty is increasing. Inflation is going up for the municipality and for everyone. But I would prefer to give that offset to the users, given the absolute term benefit to our reserves.
Are you in agreement with that?
I am. I was just using my calculator here to calculate what the difference is, and it's minimal.
Oh, okay.
Overall. Like the difference in total for the passes sold to the increase is not going to make a big difference.
There's the benefit of having a banker on council. Okay, so you've heard what council's comments are. If you want to give a consideration to those two fees when you bring the bylaw back for approval. Angie?
I'm just wondering if council has something in mind as far as that rate, because I wouldn't want Chris, like this has to be advertised for it to come back for the bylaw in December. So we just want to get an idea of what council's thinking.
So I was sort of gathering that you're talking about the same percent increase has been considered for other fee increases. Go ahead.
I do appreciate that 69.91 is considerably lower than what you would find elsewhere. So I thought somewhere maybe in between the offering and the actual, rather than just a 3% increase. So I don't know, around $90, something like that for the.
Okay, I mean, we need to be clear about precisely, you know, I'm hearing we need to decide now what comes back, because that'll be the approval point. Other thoughts? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, if I may, just for a point of reference, the Nordic trails in the county are $280 for a family and $150 for an individual starting December 2nd.
Councillor Berry?
I should know the answer to this, but is there, if you have a Nordic pass and you want to get a pass for Algonquin Highlands as well, is there a discount? To like have to hold two passes? I know
No,
at one time, I believe there was.
Chris is saying no.
Okay.
sorry, through you, Mayor. We offer a 20% discounted rate for anybody showing a season's pass from any other ski trail organization. So somebody could show up to go skiing for the day at the Frost Center, show us an HHNTA pass and receive that discount.
Did I see your hand up? Okay, so we need to land on an amount, like I'm sort of thinking, let's just stay with the percent increase that we've used in other areas, just to keep some rationale there for where we landed. Does that sound reasonable? And we'll look at it again next year. Councillor Shortreed?
You just have to remember that if you purchase before the 15th of December, you're still getting a 15% discount. So if you raise it not enough, then it'll be less than what it is now. Does that make sense? Right? So if we raise it by 3%, then if they buy it before December 15th, they're going to pay less than the 138. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, I'm just sort of thinking there's the benefit of an early purchase,
Exactly.
you know, which does kind of address some of the concerns that Deputy Mayor Dayu brought up.
Yep.
Does that sound all right with everyone? Go ahead, Dawn.
Just, if council's considering reducing those two fees for the adult and the family, would the youth and senior fee need to be revisited? Because it's new and the senior fee would just be.
Right.
What I base those individual rates on, which again is based on what other organizations are doing, is you'd have to ski 8 times to pay for that relative to paying for your day pass. So those fees are essentially relative. So the adult, the youth, and the senior are relative to the individual day pass rates 8 times. The family pass is essentially the cost of 2 individuals, which allows yourself and your dependent children, as well as your spouse. Also with a 15% discount over if they were to buy individual adult passes. So it's you could also look at reducing or adjusting those youth and senior rates, but those being new categories and they're relative to the individual day rates, and the family being a discount on 2 adult rates, it's not all exactly relative to one another, if that makes sense.
It does. Deputy Mayor Dayu?
I am happy to go just with the 3%. Even upping it to 4% might bring us a little bit closer to the goals set out by staff. Brings us a tiny bit closer to the average in the neighborhood, and still respects the troubled financial times of many folk in our community. So perhaps a 4% on the adult and on the family.
Thoughts? That sound reasonable? Okay. So we've landed on a 4% increase for those 2 categories and leaving everything else as you've recommended. Councillor Berry?
Sorry. Just in regards to this, I support the discussion on the ski trails. In regards to the Dorset Rec Center, I feel again challenged to increase the fees when the center is not in operation at this time. I don't know how many people will be buying an adult pass or adult monthly pass, but I would like to just keep them as are with the plans to increase them when back in operation?
So if somebody wanted to buy a pass, it wouldn't be in effect until the center is back open, right? I mean, so there's gonna be an overlap in years. I don't know about changing so would you be looking at, say the center's open in April? Would they then be getting a pass from April to April, or would we be giving them a reduced sort of prorated fee for the rest of the year?
It would be April to April. Anybody who had a pass previously, we gave them two options during COVID, whether or not they get their money refunded to them, or we just prorate their pass based on when the center closed during COVID. There's a number of people who would be prorated. Once their prorate is done, they would then go into, whenever they purchase the pass, it would then be starting from that date with the new fee.
You know, I'm not I'm kind of thinking I agree with what Councillor Barry is saying. That, you know, that there's so much angst about the rec center that it just seems to me that that might be one area where we really look at giving people a break, you know, for this upcoming year, you know, at least until the beginning of next year. Councillor Shortreed?
I wholeheartedly agree. There's a lot of people who
Are angry.
every day. I probably get asked twice a day. So yeah, why don't we just hold off? It's not open. We don't know when it's going to be open. The increase isn't huge.
Are we agreed on that? Okay. So any other comments about this, the fee changes for Parks and Rec? Deputy Mayor Dayu?
My apologies, because my mental math is not excellent. I've just,
I neither.
I mean, really, and I keep looking to Julie, hoping that she's gonna, I was just running the numbers. What I believed the increase would be was more along the line, this, I'm referring now to the ski trails, was more along the line of, in fact, 10%, which would go from 69.91 seasons pass to $76.90, which is, you know, you can feel that increase, but we're not going all the way up to $110. So I think a 10% increase would be reasonable.
I thought we'd landed somewhere with this
Yes,
one, but
we did, but I was going, I was not calculating that correctly in my mind.
I hear you on the math. I mean, it's just,
I support
my head explodes. Okay, so you're all in agreement with that. This is the final. Okay, you heard that, Chris?
10% on those two fee categories for ski trails.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thanks very much. All right, so that's just for information. The bylaw will come back at our next meeting. So next on your agenda is the snowball sponsorship process. Oh, could you invite Councillor Richards back in? So Councillor Richards, we're just about to start the discussion about snowball sponsorship donations. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Mayor. As council is aware, we benefit from the very generous donations of businesses, families, and individuals for a number of things that we do in the township. The Dorset Snowball has always received donations, and some, the last year we operated, we were close to 40%. I've seen it over 50% in a year. It's usually hovering somewhere around there. The process for soliciting donations until now has been not very formalized. It's been very much a matter of reaching out informally to individuals, to businesses, to families, through phone calls, through discussions with members of the committee. And what I'm proposing is that we formalize that process in a way that we can create a sponsorship level package and send it out to people and businesses that have been involved in the past and give them the opportunity through that process. And I've put the numbers there just to better show what level of donations we're receiving and look for feedback from council on whether or not they'd like to move in this direction.
Thoughts from council? Councillor Shortreed and Deputy Mayor Dayu.
I think it's a great idea. I think having it set up like this will give businesses more of a push to sponsor and get their name on the brochure like we do every year anyways. And adding the volunteer line is excellent.
Other thoughts? Deputy Mayor Dayu.
I also think it's a great idea. My only thought as I was reading the report was, have you considered using more of a snowball lexicon when it comes to naming the layers of sponsorships? So, you know, things like the snowball layer, the diamond dust layer, the hot chocolate layer, whatever it is, but something that shows just how fun the event is, because it really, really is fun.
Thoughts,
No,
Chris?
through you, Mayor. I hadn't thought of anything like that. If you have some wording suggestions, absolutely, it'd be fun to make it like that.
Councillor Dayu. Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Yeah, I'm
Get it right.
absolutely confident that yourself and Sandra would have some great thoughts there. I don't think that, you know, I can only think of snow lexicon. When I looked up snow lexicon online, they are very dry and very uninteresting. So I'm sure that there is something within your creative wheelhouse and Sandra's that could tick that.
Well, and if anybody's got any thoughts, please, let them know. I do think it's a good idea. It sounds like it, it just makes things a bit more fun. Any other thoughts about that? Councillor Barry?
Just clarification, if you're a platinum sponsor and a bronze sponsor, is there a difference in how much advertisement you're given? Is it just on the brochure or would it be on the website and banners? I don't know. I just wonder. There's incentive. I wonder what sort of incentive there is to go from, say, a gold to a platinum.
And through you, Mayor, no, this model is not proposing that. I was hoping to start it kind of in a simple form and see how it goes, and then we could build on it over time and maybe add in some various options. But the intent with this is that regardless of sponsorship level, you would be recognized on a banner or some type of signage at the event that would have these different levels on that banner, and then the name of that person or family or organization beneath that level.
So the larger donations started at the top, and that's kind of standard process. Okay, any other comments about the donation process? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the report? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, the council receives report PRT 2722 regarding snowball sponsorship donation process submitted by Chris Card and dated November 17th, 2022. And the council directs staff to proceed with the proposed sponsorship program.
All in favor? It's carried. The next item is a discussion about the recreation committees. This is something that I asked to have on the agenda during my discussions with individual members about what they might be interested in for committee structures. I heard loud and clear that there had been some challenges with there being more than one recreation committee, and that maybe we should consider going to a single committee that's responsible for the entire municipality. The thought being that the committee, when we advertise for the rec committee, that people are aware of the fact that they will be responsible to ensure that there are events in all areas of the municipality. So I think it's a good idea. The reason we need to discuss it is that there would be a change to the terms of reference, and then we need to go out and advertise for committee membership. So I'm looking for thoughts on that. Councillor Richards.
The only thing on that I would like to see given some consideration is accessibility to those meetings. For example, the Oxtongue folks might not want to come down to Stanhope or vice versa. And maybe we could bend the rules a bit on making those more accessible by Zoom or something.
Well, first of all, I got to say there's no bending rules, but we can change the rules. So that's a discussion that I had hoped to have at our next meeting. It's not on the agenda, but it is a discussion that we need to have about how we're going to go forward. There are definitely challenges. There's challenges on both sides of that. In that it makes it a lot easier. People don't have to travel as far, and we're strictly talking about committee meetings, not council meetings. But there's also members of committees who have not got access to internet. Some of them don't have equipment. So, we're going to have to kind of try and balance those challenges. Just to let you know, though, we will have that discussion, but it isn't on the agenda today. Because if whatever decision we make, it's got to be for all of our committees as opposed to just one. But, sure, there's going to be consideration there. Any other thoughts about going to a single rec committee? And what changes, other changes at this time we might like to see to the terms of reference? Deputy Mayor Dayu?
I do see value in the idea very, very much. I also very much support what Sabrina is suggesting and have had that thought myself. And I appreciate we're going to talk about it next meeting, but in a way, the outcome of that conversation will probably influence how I feel about this conversation. Because for all the reasons that Councillor Richards has already stated. So I'm sort of in that flux, to be honest.
And it's not on the agenda for discussion today.
That's right. That's right.
So I'm getting the evil eye from the clerk. She's really good at that. Okay, so here we can do two things, or one of two things. We can make a decision today about having a single rec committee. We're not really having formal meetings now. We can wait until January, but it means that we have to wait to advertise. And I'm not sure how to deal with that. I will start with Councillor Berry, Councillor Shortreed, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Hi, I do support the culmination of the rec committees, especially in regards to planning and event planning and just having a bit of a full township philosophy. I guess my one thought is, in order for us to do that, would we need to be reviewing the terms of reference prior to that?
Well, we need to know where we're going to land before we know what the terms of reference are going to say. And we have to keep in mind when we're talking about any kind of blended or Zoom meetings, we're talking about staff and costs associated with staff time. And when the meetings are held, because quite often people want to meet in the evening, that's overtime or lieu time, there's considerations there. Councillor Berry?
I do think that if you were to have one committee versus three committees, there would be maybe more staff time, but there potentially would be less mileage if that was an option.
Yeah. Well, that's true, but I'm not sure that the mileage covers the cost of overtime for staff or lieu time. I'm just going to go to Angie just to see if you've got any thoughts on this before we go further.
As far as process, I'm just wondering if we could bring the terms of reference to the December meeting, just so council can have a review of that and maybe a discussion on what that might look like as far as Zoom meetings, including Zoom meetings or not. That would allow then appointment in January and not appointment in January, my apologies. It'd be advertising in January and then appointment after that. Just on Mayor, what you mentioned is it isn't just our own staff time. It potentially is IT staff time as well. So that just for consideration.
So there's some real costs associated with that. Counselor Short Reed?
Just on that, we are reducing staff time going from 3 meetings to 1, right? 3,
You don't have a, going to maintain the Oxtongue Lake Community Center Committee, so it's
okay, yeah.
2 meetings.
But back to the other, obviously the Dorset Rec Center isn't open and Stanhope doesn't have a committee right now. So whether we wait to January or not is almost irrelevant. Right?
Counselor Dayu?
And I would add to that, that I would suggest that we don't advertise until there is a consensus on
Oh.
whether we go to Zoom or not, because that will radically change.
No, we won't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, it's all got to fall together. Okay,
Yeah.
I think that it's a good idea to bring the terms of reference to our December meeting and, you know, we can also add the thought about having Zoom committee meetings or a blended form of meeting. Counselor Berry, did I see your hand up again?
Before we commit to having one rec committee, I think that we should have a fulsome discussion of having one, like, instead of saying Oxtongue gets to have their rec committee and the other two merge.
There's a
I
difference.
just think there's some equality.
The difference is that the purpose of the Oxtongue Committee was to keep their community center alive more than it being a rec committee. Now I know that they do talk about activities, but I see that there is definitely a difference there. That I mean that their whole raison d'etre came from years ago us talking about closing the Oxtongue Center, and they were here en masse saying, look, we'll do everything we can to keep the center open. And they do tend to have somewhat different types of events than recreation programs per se. So I would still see the rec committee, if there were sports or outdoor activities that were being organized in Oxtongue, that it would be the single rec committee that would do that.
Okay.
Whereas, the ladies in Oxtongue want to have a, book reading or something different. There's where my differentiation is, that it's not, we're not setting rec aside for Oxtongue. It's more, let's say it may be more cultural in nature. Councillor Richards.
Actually, based on what you just said, I'm wondering if the fact that Stanhope doesn't have a committee at the moment, it wouldn't help to have the ladies from Oxtongue maybe use their knowledge in doing a good community center up there to bring down to Stanhope. And so merging them into one may work.
Well, that's another discussion entirely. Let's bring the terms of reference and we'll all think about this and have a discussion in December. I do definitely see, like, what my thinking was that if the ladies in Oxtongue want to be involved in an activity that's being organized in Oxtongue for Oxtongue Lake, that they, by all means. But I did see that, that the purpose for that committee was different than the rec committees. And so that's why I kind of thought about leaving them where they are. Councillor Berry.
Final comment. My one thought is that even if we keep with two committees, a rec committee for Algonquin Highlands and an Oxtongue Lake, it would be nice to see some cross pollination so that the Oxtongue Lake is part of some of the discussions in event planning and just recreation and culture as a whole.
I don't disagree with that. It's changing people's thought process and, what they've always done. And, with volunteers, it's a little bit of a sensitive thing. Anyway, we're having more and more difficulty. A lot of our volunteers are aging. They're getting, sort of digging in their heels about how we've always done things. So, it's a pretty broad discussion. So we'll bring this back to December and see where we land then. We will have to land somewhere in December. Okay, so where there's no resolution required for that. Thanks, Chris. Unless I shouldn't sign you off unless we hear whether you've got some thoughts on any of the discussion that we've had here. My apologies. I should have asked you sooner.
No, that's absolutely fine, and thank you for the opportunity. All of the points that have been brought up are points that I was prepared to bring up myself if given the opportunity. So I agree with all the discussion that's been had. I certainly believe that, and in discussion with Sandra as well, when we were first asked to start putting some thoughts into this, one of the first things that came up was also that it's quite far for people to travel from one location to the other. So you might not necessarily get people who have in the past been involved in the various committees wanting to travel to other locations, and whether or not that ends up looking like having meetings on a rotating schedule between different locations. The preferred may be the Zoom method. Absolutely. If we are going that direction, depending on the requirements for it, it requires IT time, but yeah, we are losing a couple of meetings that Sandra has to go to. We're also losing a couple of meetings that the members of council who sit on those committees have to go to, which you could also look at as meeting the goals of reducing some of the emissions which the township is committed to. So certainly a large part of that, but all very good points, and I'll put some thought and time into the terms of reference, and look forward to the discussion in December.
Great, that's great. Yeah, for sure we need to bring Sandra into the discussion and see what thoughts she might, or ideas that she might have. And I wonder if it's possible for someone to give us kind of an estimated idea about what the cost of IT and staffing, what that impact is, so we know what we're talking about. It's one thing to say, well, we need IT people, but we don't know, really what the full impact of that is.
If I may,
Mhm.
and it will be different depending on what council directs as far as live streaming. So if, going back, council had decided that committee meetings were not going to be live streamed. So if council wants the meetings to go to Zoom, but still not live stream, that's different than just having a Zoom meeting. So that directions will need to be given in order to sort of give that.
That has a different impact on
Yeah.
how much time is required by staff.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just consider those options too at our next meeting. Okay, sound good to everybody? Any questions, thoughts? Okay, thanks, Chris.
Thank
We
you.
look forward to our December discussion. Next up is the environment business, so we will bring Melissa in. Good morning, Melissa.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
So if you want to take us through your activity report for the month of October.
My pleasure. In the waste world, as we've had at our last report, lots going on in Blue Box transition. We've had some interesting conversations at the broader county level about upcoming projects. So I'd like to leave it if council members have questions. As you know, I can speak on to extent of any of these points, but I'd sort of like to have your direction as to what you might be interested in.
I've got a couple of questions before I go to council members. I'm just wonder if you could give us an idea about how far along we are in the Maple Lake project. Sort of, for the overall project, are we like halfway through, quarter of the way through?
Thank you, Mayor. And most of the groundwork is done on that project. So most of the hauling has been completed. The materials are on site. The contractor has just started construction of the bin wall. So that's a fairly exciting sort of next step in the project. Obviously, winter has emerged, and that will slow things down considerably until the spring, where as soon as possible that will get moving again. So things are on track for where we had hoped they would be. But there still is a fair ways to go to the finished product there. I would say just sort of an estimate, we're over halfway.
Okay, right on. And with respect to the Hawk Lake landfill closure, is this, when you say that you've completed, the grading has been completed and final cover as well, does that mean that that the restoration is complete, or that's still in progress?
So just, an update to this, since the report was written, the work there has actually totally been completed. So the contractor has completed work there, and we will be notifying the ministry shortly that closure work is completed.
And is there a testing or sampling process that's associated with the closure of that site?
Yes, so we just we completed a final survey, and as well, they've assessed the amount of cover that's been placed to assure that that met the requirements of the closure plan.
Okay. Any other questions about this particular report? Councillor Barry, then Councillor Richards.
Just wanted clarification on what the circular material municipal working group is.
So the circular materials is a sort of a broader term of waste reduction. So they've just changed the terminology of that. So these are all waste reduction, blue box transition planning, extended producer responsibility, and larger, broader waste reduction working groups and discussions that are fairly ongoing in the background.
Councillor Richards.
The Blue Box transition program, that's referring to the where the Ontario government's transitioning to the producers being responsible for recycling materials. Is that right? And so on that, it's my understanding that the producers are only going to be obligated to existing services. Is that something that is still being discussed, or is that that's a definite that's what we're expecting?
If I may, through you, the mayor.
Yes, absolutely.
So the regulations surrounding blue box transition and the new extended producer responsibility, that regulation has been passed. So that is set, and that sets what the producer's obligations are. So in that, they are obligated to provide similar level of service as is currently offered, but it's not exactly. So for example, if they have to provide the same number of services as we do for garbage collection, but they don't have to be at the same locations. So there's a lot of negotiations and discussions going on at this time around that, and working with the producer responsibility organizations as to how municipalities can work together with them, or whether they will take over operations. And some of this, there's a lot of questions on the table at this point. So I will be bringing a report back to council. I'm just hoping to get a little bit more clarification on a couple of those details. And as I say, it'll be a fairly extensive report with a lot of those details. And my hope is to have that early in the new year.
Did you have a follow-up question, Councillor Richards?
So if we were to do something like a new transfer station, that could potentially be impacted on the recycling program.
Yes, so the data that they are basing operations on was from 2019, 2020. So anything that we change or anything new that's done would have to be negotiated with them.
Any other questions on this report? Hearing none, then could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the activity report for October? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Berry.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved, council receives report EB 222 submitted by Melissa Murray and dated November 17th, 2022 for information.
All in favor? That's carried. All right, next up is your proposed fee changes. If you want to take us through that and what the primary changes are, I believe that you may have some questions after that.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to start from the top of the list, lagoon fees have not, I have not proposed a change there. Lagoon usage has been down recently. So that there has been, in the previous, we have been working towards getting that sort of to a fee for service system, and we still will need to work towards that. Just at this time, it didn't seem the opportunity to do that. And moving through the waste tipping fees, a bit of an increase as far as household garbage. Now that doesn't affect most residents. Most of our residents are not hauling more than a cubic yard of garbage at a time. So the other municipalities in the county have commercial rates, and we do not, and that may be something that could be considered in the future. So this proposed change would typically affect our commercial waste hauler or users. Mattresses and box springs is a significant increase in our fees there. That is to try and keep things more in keeping with our surrounding municipalities. And that was something that came out of service delivery review, was to have more consistency in fees. And we have had a fair number of discussions and have been looking at that. There is a fair bit of diversity across the county for a number of reasons. So some things we're getting closer, and some things will be a little bit more challenging, but that was a fairly easy one to look at. One thing in there, we've also been discussing some other ideas as far as those materials, to look at maybe a recycling program that would reduce costs and that sort of thing. So those just haven't, details of those haven't been worked out yet. So this is within our existing system. Fees for bulky waste construction materials, that's a 3% increase. And always we're moving towards as cost recovery in those. We're still not getting there yet, even though those are significant fees. And when we get to the stage that we're looking at scaled loads and that sort of thing, there'll be some reevaluation of some of those fees, and that I expect would come back later when we have a better idea of where things are moving with the scales. Brush, a bit of an increase there that results from increased costs in chipping, and a bit of encouragement for people to be handling brush, particularly small brush, within their own properties. And the final changes, just a minor note, adding in pedal boats to be classified as boats. It was just a bit unclear previously. And a proposed change for canoe kayaks and paddle boards, just to bring that to a flat fee instead of a per foot. There's not a huge amount of variability in those vessels, so it is just a little bit simpler for people to understand and manage those costs with a flat fee there. So those are just proposals. I would appreciate feedback from council on their thoughts on there, and I can provide any clarification you'd like.
For my purposes, I'm pleased to hear you say that there's going to be some consideration given to a little addition to the ability to recycle for instance, pieces of furniture. I think that there might be an opportunity there. When it comes to the increase in mattresses and box springs, to me, there's a huge difference. You know, when you just say mattress, that could be a mattress from a crib or a mattress from a king size bed, and you're asking for the same amount of money. And that didn't seem like, I understand there's probably increases in fees to, you know, to chew the material up and spit it out. But it seems like for a flat fee for something that could be so different. Was there any discussion about that, or what are your thoughts there?
Mattress flat fee is I would say is an industry standard. And I do realize that there's, you know, a large amount of variation across that. With mattresses, you know, the cost for handling them is fairly simple, or is similar regardless of the size of them, as far as, you know, equipment and you know, even space in a container and things like that. So it is, you know, significantly different. But like I say, it's not something we've ever, you know, considered in the past. I mean, it certainly could be. Mattresses typically aren't included in scaled weights or anything along those lines. Most municipalities do just have a flat fee for them.
Okay, look for comments and questions. We'll go around the table. Start with Councillor Berry.
I did have a similar comment about the mattress and that, but my thought was, by having a substantial fee, especially for a piece of furniture that could be reused, it might encourage people to take it to a reuse it center versus the landfill. I guess my question would be, is there a difference in price versus a broken couch that's being taken to the dump versus a couch that could be, would a broken couch be considered bulky waste? You know what I mean? I'm not sure if I've made that clear.
If I may,
Yes, absolutely.
We don't assess fees based on the condition of the item. Although if items are in good reusable condition, certainly, you know, the attendants work with folks to help them, you know, understand the other options that might be available, things like the, you know, the search warehouse, even, you know, the restore in Bracebridge and in Huntsville and things like that. So we try and keep obviously good materials out of the waste system. But if people have chosen that they want to dispose of them, it is handled as waste, and furniture is handled on the per piece basis, as opposed to bulky items. If the furniture was entirely broken down, you know, if someone had a dresser and they've smashed it into pieces, then it would be assessed on a cubic yardage basis under bulky items. It's a bit difficult to have a sort of one size fits all you know, rule for things, because there's so much variability in what we see coming into the site. So do our best to provide, you know, the guidelines that help people to understand, you know, what fees they can expect when they come into the site. But there certainly has to be some judgment on behalf of the attendants.
Councillor Richards.
On the mattress issue, I think this is actually a pretty common issue, because we keep hearing about it in the community about mattresses. You know, I had somebody talk about taking 4 mattresses to the dump and being told it was going to cost $16, $15 a mattress. So they put them back in the truck and they took them to Port Perry for $6. We as a marina have actually, because of construction going on at the marina, been taking our garbage to ACES because it's literally a quarter of the cost compared to taking it to Maple. So I'm wondering where we're going with these fees. And I understand you just mentioned that we're still not hitting a cost recovery. I'm not sure that a dump ever will. So where are we going with, between being a service provided to the community to, you know, or are we trying to just avoid accepting waste and sending it maybe to another jurisdiction to him?
I'm happy to speak to that if you'd like.
Okay,
And I fully understand, you know, and working with contractors, particularly in businesses, I would never hesitate to encourage them to work directly with a hauler. With construction and bulky materials, we end up being sort of a middle stage in the process. So the municipality is contracting somebody like ACES to come and remove those materials from our site. So that's why you see your costs being cheaper to go directly to them, because that's one less handling, one less hauling. The materials are going directly to the processing facility to be handled, where we're a middle step in there. So that's why our costs end up being greater, because we're having not only to handle the materials ourselves, but pay someone to handle them from our site to theirs, and then there's their processing cost on top of that. So that just sort of lays the framework for where things are at. Obviously, we're looking to do everything we can to try and reduce the municipality's cost to handle those materials. A huge challenge we have is with assessing loads, and so we have always had a disparity between the amount of material that comes in and the amount of material that goes out, that we pay to have hauled out from our sites. So the move towards scaled loads and will hopefully help with that a bit. But in the meantime, the costs have to be shared amongst all the materials that we receive. So they do end up being a bit higher there. And obviously, we want to be able to provide this service, for our residents. But it's a struggle always looking at cost of who should be paying for it. So if you're renovating, or if you've renovated or demolished your house, does the cost of that demolition need to be shared amongst the entire tax base? And so that's just something that's a bit of a struggle in setting things in the direction of cost recovery, as far as services that are not consistently offered they're consistently offered but not utilized by all residents. So that's where the sort of fee for service comes in. And we don't look to fee for service, obviously, with household waste and recycling. Those are have been considered as part of our base services that everybody receives and everybody utilizes.
I would think as well that depending on the size of the municipality, the size of the landfill, the level of sophistication of the landfill would have a difference in the sort of costs that you can or fees that you can set. Would be quite different. I mean, I don't know, but I would suspect that would also be part of the case.
We certainly suffer, from the low end of economies of scale. We're small volume, small sites, long distances, so those all contribute to our costs being higher than other municipalities.
Councillor Shortreed, did I see your hand up?
My question was already answered.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Thank you. Getting back a little bit to the idea of breaking down big items into its constituent parts. I wonder if you could walk us through the trifecta of furniture, bulky waste, and what stays in landfill versus what gets hauled out. So for example, if someone takes an old couch, definitely can't go to search or anywhere else. So they have two options. One, they bring the couch directly and are charged for the couch at 15 per piece. Oh no, that's not upholstered, sorry. At the proposed 30 per piece. And that gets hauled out. Or if they were to break it down in their constituent into its constituent parts, would that go into the landfill instead of being hauled at the rate set out by bulky waste? And the question that I'm trying to resolve in my own mind is, what kind of offset is there if we are able to keep costs lower because things may not be hauled out? Is the offset the fact that we're filling up our landfill faster because more material is staying in it and therefore shortening its lifetime? Could you clarify that for us?
If I may. Yes, a complicated question, and I'll do my best to see what I can offer to that. So we have to weigh things against what costs are, and making fees set so that members of our site users are comfortable to know what to expect as far as costs. So furniture is a fairly common item that comes into the site, and people have a difficult time, if you have a dresser, to know like how many cubic yards is a dresser. So that's where having a flat fee for furniture is to handle some of the simpler items that are commonly brought in, that don't have a huge impact on the volume or mass of material that we have at the site. So in your example of a couch, so if a couch comes in and it's whole, and it has some metal in it has some wood in it, and it has a fair bit of upholstered material, there's the fill in the cloth and that sort of thing. When we haul that out from the site, it's broken down by a processor, not by us. If that material was all broken down at the site, it might go into 3 or 4 different, be separated into 3 to 4 different areas: the metal, and scrap metal, the wood into the construction material, the upholstery part into the mattress bin. So the materials are all still the same, just handled in different ways. And really what it amounts to is who is putting in the effort and the time and the cost to separate those materials. And so if a user goes to the extent of separating all those things, yes, their cost actually may reduce a bit because they have been able to take out some, scrap metals out, and there wouldn't be a charge for that. The wood be taken out, and the volume of it may be less than it was what would contribute to the cost of the $30 in the furniture bin. So it's difficult to sort of just have, again, a sort of a flat statement to say this is how it works. There's a lot of different factors go into it, and a lot of times it's a matter of when the load comes into the site, the attendants are assessing it based on what they see there in front of them, and using the fees that we have to ensure that the fees that are charged to site users are consistent and explainable, that they have a way that they can say. So if it comes in and it's materials that are broken down, they can measure out a cubic yard. If it's a piece of furniture and it's solid, it goes by the furniture rate. So just let me know if I've clarified it all, or if you've got further questions, please let me fill in a few more details.
You have a follow-up question?
No, I that does help, and my brain is already moving towards Environment and Stewardship Committee and public education and the sorts of ways that we can spread the good word that, if the more work you put in on your end to get these pieces into their constituent parts, the better it is for the landfill, the better it is for your costs, the better it is for the municipality. And I think there's some scope there for some interesting public education work.
Any other questions on the fee schedule that Melissa's proposing? Okay, so we just received that from information. And I think that maybe we might call for a 15-minute coffee break at this point in time. It's a good time for a break. Thanks, Melissa. So we will break until 10:30. Welcome back to the meeting. Next on the agenda is the Public Works Department. We'll bring in Adam. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning.
So first is your monthly activity report. If you want to take us through that and any highlights you've got.
Yes, thank you. Pretty straightforward for this time of year. As the equipment changeover, as the seasons change. A couple key notes I'd like to show is that we did finally get the delivery of our 3/4 ton pickup truck for the maintenance department. That was almost a year waiting for that truck. So it was nice to see that get in. Another one I wanted to bring to your attention was also the screening and stacking of winter sand. This will be for, usually we stay a year ahead of what we need for winter sand. So you may know that we did 2 years of sand this year, only because we missed out on last year. So this is sand for 2023 and 2024. So we got that started. Since this report, it has been finished. At the bottom of roads and street lighting, you'll see that our eye will be starting to mark down approximate tonnage of sand that we use. It's not a requirement by anything, but I just thought it was important to show that now we can track that information through the ROTA program that we have in place. And other than that, it's like I said, it's pretty straightforward. I've been with the town for 12 years now, and this is the second time I've seen us where we've had to actually plow and sand in October. The last time we did that was in 2012. So it's interesting to see that we were actually out on the 20th of October, I believe, for plowing and sanding operations. More snow in the north end than down in the south, but good to see we were ready for it, and we're able to get over our roads safely.
Well, that's good news. And I'm sure that the sledders are hoping that the trend of snow continues for a good season. The only question that I've got about your report, Adam, is it was my understanding that the location of the future Stanhope garage would be where the sand piles are. So is your scheduling of stockpiling enough sand for 2 years going to interfere with that in any way?
No, so the first stockpiling of sand that we created, screening and stockpiling, was done, I believe, in early September. Actually, sorry, I believe it was done sometime this summer. I'd have to look back, but and then it was transferred over to our Irwin Pit location, which is off of Heron Landing. That's where we stockpiled our sand last year. Now, the sand that was just completed, that is currently stockpiled in the lower pit, which is where the proposed new garage will be. So we will be moving that over to the Irwin Pit next year to make room for the garage. All that sand had to be taken out of the bank, so it actually worked really well for us to utilize that for road sand as opposed to just pushing it over the bank and not utilizing it later on down the road. So it has hopefully decreased some of the groundworks that was required to build the garage, but we'll definitely see that more as it comes to when the project gets started.
Okay, thank you. Other questions on Adam's activity report? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillor Short-Reed and Barry.
Moved by Councillor Short-Reed, second by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved, Council receives report PW 3922 submitted by Adam Thorne and dated November 17th, 2022 for information.
All in favor? That's carried. And if you want to speak to your proposed fee changes.
Yes, thank you. Proposed fees changes for this year is based on 2% increase, and it's pretty straightforward across the board. Nothing really to speak of. The excavator, sorry, the mini excavator surcharge for interments was up $100 just due to the fuel cost. So that's pretty straightforward.
Any questions on the proposed fee changes? Hearing none, we will receive that for information. And thank you, Mr. Thornton.
Thank you.
Next is fire services, so we'll bring in the chief. Good morning, Chief French.
Morning, Your Worship and members of council.
Any highlights that you'd like to bring to our attention on your monthly report?
Yes, there's a couple I'd like to bring to attention. As October was Fire Prevention Month, we did have all 3 stations partake in a door-to-door smoke alarm check. And during that time, they went to 51 houses through the 3 stations. We did have to install 6 smoke alarms, but they did show a compliance rate of 88%, which is 100% is our goal, but 88% is a good starting point. We want to enhance the program next year by doing it in summer months too. We'll combine it with our training for boat training. So we'll emphasize in July and August being out on the lakes. It'll be an opportunity for our boat operators to practice docking. At the same time, they'll go into that cottage and check for the smoke detectors to make sure they're present. That's part of our required public education program we have. Throughout the year, the association has been very, very supportive in helping us with events and partaking in and going to cottage associations and other events again to meet that compliance. The second thing is we're bringing 4 names for hiring for the department from our recruitment process here. There will be 2 additional next meeting that didn't meet they're waiting for the vulnerable sector checks, hadn't come in time. So it will be 4 additional at Dorset and 4 additional at Stanhope. At this time, we have a couple of people that are interested in Oxen Lake, but they haven't brought their applications forward. So since that time, we've also in Stanhope had 2 other people bring their names forward after we tentatively closed, even though it's ongoing after making selections. So we're starting to get a bit of a pool so we can ensure that we do have adequate staffing at the Stanhope station, which has always been a challenge to keep it fully staffed. The last thing I want to mention is 2 weekends ago, we had a large brush fire that took place in Kimball Lake. And the efforts of the 3 departments really helped. They worked so hard. It was a Crown property fire, but as we're aware, the fire season ends October 31st and the ministry had no crews. So our firefighters did step up for 2 days and control the fire that ranged between just under 30 acres, but there's no stop point if they hadn't been there. It would have went right from Kimball Lake right up potentially to Highway 60. So we're in the process of cost recovery from the M&R for the costs of the fire. But I just want to thank the firefighters there. They did give an extreme effort to control that fire. Other than that, if there's any questions.
Just ask that you pass on our appreciation for their work with respect to that. Maybe the MNRF might think about the fact that climate change might have an impact going forward on the duration of their season.
Definitely are. I've met with the MNR twice this week, and they are looking at changing their process because of climate change. It was just so dry this last couple of weeks, and that wasn't only for us. That was right across the board for Muskoka and the rest of the county. So they are looking at making changes, and they have been very, very, very cooperative in supporting our efforts to recoup our costs.
That's good to hear. And congratulations on the success you're having in recruitment. Sounds
yes, it's
like
nice to
going
see
really
we're
well.
getting a wide variety. We've including paramedic, a couple of diesel mechanics. So we do have every end of the spectrum, a couple with full training too. So it's good to see that we're starting to get some numbers.
And bringing different skills to the table too. Sounds good.
Definitely.
Any questions for Chief French? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive his monthly activity report? Counselor Shortreed, Counselor Richards.
Moved by Counselor Shortreed, second by Counselor Richard. Be it resolved that council receives report FD 2024-22 regarding monthly activities submitted by Michael French and dated November 17th, 2022, and that council appoints Greg Watson, Trevor Vieira, Lucas Farmington, and Fred Holtby as firefighters for Station 60. Benjamin Daddy, Cole Newton, Zachary Watkins, and Paisley Shannon as firefighters for Station 80.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Enjoy your day, everybody.
And you. Next are some items under finance. And I think maybe we'll bring in our treasurer. Morning, Jeannie.
Good morning.
So your first report is on the tax write-offs.
Yes, that's correct. Through you, Mayor, it's just our standard report, 3122 for a couple of property roll write-offs for taxes under the demolition raised by fire 357 section in a total of $635.25 for council's review and approval.
Any questions on those write-offs? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to approve them? Councilor Richards, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Counselor Richards, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved that council receives report TT 3122 regarding tax write-offs submitted by Karen Mintz and dated November 17th, 2022. And the council hereby approves the noted write-offs totals under section 357 of the Municipal Act for taxes in the amount of $635.25.
All in favor? Next is the account summary.
Again, through you, Mayor, this is the accounts that have been paid through payroll and accounts payable by check, electronic fund, and pre-authorized payment for the period of October 5th to November 8th in the amount of $1,934,924.63 for council's review and approval.
Any questions on the account summary? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to approve the account summary? Councilor Barry and Shortreed.
Moved by Counselor Berry, second by Counselor Shortreed. Be it resolved, council has reviewed the expenditures incurred to set out an account summary report TT 3222 in the amount of $1,934,924.63 and hereby approves payment as same.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is your financial summary.
Yes, again. Thank you. This is for the third quarter of the year. Notably, this is the point in time summary. So invoices and so forth that have been issued for work completed over the summer may or may not be shown in this numbers because they possibly have been received after the fact. So, and this is for all summary of all units. So this is the entire township as a whole for council's review. As I said, it's showing us at about 53% of the annual operating expenses. But we do have to keep in mind that a lot of the works in certain departments may happen over the fall. And so these numbers will change as the year goes on and there'll be another look at for council to see later this year. So.
Yeah, I must admit, I was a little bit taken aback at the percentages, acknowledging that there are a couple of fairly substantial capital works projects that will carry over to next year. Which account for a fair bit of that. It was a little bit surprising. So I'm glad to hear that, there's still quite a bit of invoicing yet to come in and be accounted for. Council have questions about the summary? Hearing none. Could I have a mover and a seconder then to accept the financial summary? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councilor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, Council receives report TT 3322 submitted by Jean Hughes and dated November 17th, 2022 regarding revenues and expenditures to the end of the third quarter of 2022.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally is the correspondence from Lee Payne about a donation for the Dorset Museum.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And again, it's just for information for council and an opportunity to show our appreciation for the continued support to the Dorset Heritage Museum. We received a $20,000 donation from the Friends of the Dorset Museum in November.
Are there any questions about that? I would hope that we would send a letter of appreciation and thanks to them.
Most certainly.
I mean, it's a pretty substantial donation.
Yes, it is.
Could we have a movement or seconder to gratefully receive that donation? Deputy Mayor Dayu and Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that council receives with sincere appreciation a donation in the amount of $20,000 from the Friends of the Dorset Heritage Museum.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Madam Treasurer.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Next on the agenda are administrative issues, and the first is electronic monitoring. And I believe that that would be our CIO to respond to.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this is a new policy before council. Excuse me. And as the report reads, it is a result of Bill 27, which is the Working for Workers Act that came into effect in November of 2021. That bill also required, as council will recall, our disconnecting from work policy that was passed in May of this year. So this policy before you, it outlines and is required to outline what we currently electronically monitor. And that's so that staff are aware of what we do, and it's in writing. So we are required to describe what we monitor, how we monitor it, how we use the information, and any changes that are made are required to be provided to staff within a certain time frame. So as council will see with the policy, we've outlined the 5 areas that we do electronically monitor. And that includes building and fuel security systems, internet and email resources, GPS technology, township phones, including our VoIP phones, as well as any mobile phones and any video surveillance that we have. And I just want to point out that any monitoring that we do, for example, with computers is not keystroke monitoring. It is literally if something goes wrong, if we have a security issue, then we're able to go back and look at it. So, and department heads have reviewed the policy at our last department head meeting and have no issues. So it's before council for consideration.
You know, on first blush, I know that this looks like a bit of a Big Brother is watching, but for the most part, it's a matter of health and safety, really, and only if we have some sort of breach. I would want to know a little bit more about monitoring of the township phones. Like, how does that work?
So again, it is not, the township does not monitor phone calls or emails on your phone necessarily, or your text messages, or our VoIP phones, for example. But if there was a security breach, IT staff would be able to go back and look and see where that, existed, what happened, dates and times, and all those things.
Do council have any questions on the policy? Councillor Barry.
Yep, I agree that I sort of was taken aback at first, and then I knew this was coming. I'd seen it in other correspondence out there in the world, but looking at it, it seems quite clear. My one question was just in regards to internet and email resources. It says receipt of a complaint or for retrieval of information? When would some information be retrieved? Would that just be in a breach, or? It isn't quite clear on what it says. While computer activity is logged and tracked, the township does not actively engage in regular monitoring of work issued computers unless specifically required due to security breach, unusual activity or incident, or receipt of a complaint, or for retrieval of information. I guess it's the retrieval of information that I wanted understanding of.
Go ahead.
So the retrieval of information would be specifically if there was a breach, or if, for example, a crime had been committed by someone employed by the township, for example. So, and they were no longer in the employ of the township. So, you know, if the township suspected upon the departure that a staff, a crime had been committed, we would be able to retrieve that information from their computer. Yeah.
Any other questions on this item? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive and approve the report? Councillor Richards, Councillor Short-Reed.
Moved by Councillor Richards, second by Councillor Short-Reed. Be it resolved, council receives report CAO 1222 regarding the electronic monitoring policy submitted by Angie Bird and dated November 17th, 2022, and the council directs a bylaw be tabled for further consideration to adopt the said policy.
All in favor? It's carried. Next on the agenda is are the Dorset Museum Committee minutes. Any comments about the minutes? Seemed to me there was something here about a cost for something. Go ahead.
Are you referring to the printer copier?
I think maybe I am. I think there was. Have you got any comment? Is there anything you want to add to that?
I'm just unaware if that is something that that is coming to council for council's okay, or where that lives.
I'm not sure what that process is. Maybe Angie can help us with that.
Unfortunately, I'm unaware of this. So we did provide a printer from the township. I wasn't aware that it didn't meet all the requirements. So if that's the case, then we'll need the details on what those requirements are so that we can get that process moving for them.
Well, and don't we normally have a request from the museums in writing about transfer of funds, like if there's, leftover funds going into reserves, and
yeah,
we look for that as well. Okay, Councillor Short-Reed.
I seem to remember what they're looking for is the printer, what the township gave them, just a straight printer. They can't photocopy and they can't scan. So they have nothing to use photocopy or scan. So it's just a straight computer printer, period. So it doesn't do everything they needed to do. So that's what they're looking for.
Councillor Berry.
And since this meeting, there's been another meeting, and I believe there's enough money within their budget to get a printer.
So does
does
that,
the printing and copying, but I think
does that require our approval? Okay. Oh, right. Well, that's a good clarification. Thank you for that. Any other questions then about the Dorset Museum? Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the minutes? Councillor Short-Reed and Councillor Berry.
Moved by Councillor Short-Reed, second by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved, the council receives the September 27th, 2022 Dorset Museum meeting minutes as information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next up is planning. We will bring in our planner extraordinaire. Good morning, Mr. O'Callaghan.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
If we want to start with your comments on Bill 23.
Certainly. So the province introduced on October 25th of this year significant changes, proposed changes to a number of acts, including the Planning Act, Development Charges Act, and others. This is to support the province's goal of constructing or having 1.5 million homes constructed by 2031. So I have highlighted a number of the proposed changes that would have an impact on Algonquin Highlands. There are also a number of changes that will not have an impact on our township. They're more directed towards large urban centers. The province is seeking comments and feedback on a number of these changes. There are some tight timeframes as far as turnaround there. So for the Planning Act changes, they are looking for comments by November 24th. There are some changes proposed to natural heritage legislation, which would include wetlands. And for comments on those features, it would be December 30th is when they're looking for comments by. So staff have put together this report sort of as information for council consideration, and also seeking direction on any comments that council would like to put forward to the province on these proposed changes.
One of the concerns that I had with respect to this is that the county has been looking at development charges, and I don't know where we'll land with that. But, you know, it just seems, I personally am opposed to the idea that we would give reduced rates to developers for development charges, that, you know, that would impact all taxpayers, and I don't think that that's fair. So I take exception to that. I definitely take exception to reducing protection on wetlands. It seems to me the province seems to be moving in a direction that takes absolutely no consideration or gives no consideration to the environment. And I really take exception to that as well. But I would look for comments from other members of council on different aspects of points that John's brought up. Councillor Barry.
I too have an issue with the wetlands, and I'm hoping that we can make comment on that specifically. But another concern I have is in regards to the subdivision approvals. And there will no longer be public meetings and possibly no site plan control. So I have issue with both of those.
Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Yes, natural heritage wetlands. I think that's a dire concern, and I very much hope that this council will be in agreement of creating some comments that are fairly strongly worded about our concerns, especially given how essential wetlands are to our township and our county. I don't know, Madam Mayor, if that is something that you would like to discuss in great detail today, or I know we've got an upcoming meeting before comments are due on natural heritage. So however you want to see that happen, but I do have some thoughts if you want to get into the details now. But distinct from natural heritage and wetlands, one of the key concerns that I had and discussed with Sean was about removing third-party appeals to application processes, which essentially would mean, and Sean, do correct me if I'm wrong, if your neighbor is permitted to do something that you find terribly disgruntling to your enjoyment of your property, you would no longer have the right to appeal that decision. Is that a correct interpretation of that?
Yes, that is correct.
Mm-hmm. So that might be something worthy of our conversation as well.
I think that maybe now might be the best time to have the discussion. So I would look for you to expand on your comments about natural heritage.
Shall I do that?
Yes.
Shall I do that right
please.
now? All right. Thanks. So as we all know, natural heritage, and we've talked about this so many times in the past, natural heritage is the central component of our life here in Algonquin Highlands and in the county. Wetlands, although we have very few provincially significant wetlands in the township, we have very many smaller wetland complexes that have a very important ecological function in our township. And so the idea that we would be weakening protection for provincially significant wetlands is, in my opinion, going in the opposite direction that we should be going in, which is to strengthen them and to look at more complicated wetland complexes, including smaller wetlands that tie together into a whole, rather than looking at the larger wetland pieces itself. A lot of species at risk rely on smaller wetland complexes. It provides incredible habitat for Halliburton's biodiversity. I think we should be putting every effort into protecting what the regulations we have, and in fact strengthening those. I think it's also worth mentioning that if wetlands are destroyed, it eliminates their ability to act as carbon sinks, and therefore exacerbates the negative effects of climate change, including losing the ability to mitigate flooding, which is a serious problem in our county. And in Minden, we know they've had 3 states of emergency due to flooding. This is one of our natural features that can best protect us from those scenarios. Certainly creating of a natural heritage offsetting policy, I think, has dire consequences. And there's a misnomer that is intuitive in the language of the bill, in which it is suggested that if you pay into a fund, you would be able to have more of an impact on a natural heritage area. And basically that would be offset. And there is no such offset. You cannot develop in a natural heritage area to any positive benefit, either by paying into a fund, or what they've suggested here is that they can be recreated or restored elsewhere. You cannot recreate a natural heritage area with a strong biodiversity in it. You can't do it. You can't restore it either. The only thing we can do to protect these areas is to leave them intact. So I think to comment on the misnomer of those pay to slay policies and the natural heritage offsetting policy is also something that I'd like to see us tackle. Those would be my key points.
Does anyone disagree with what Councillor Dyer is saying? Okay. Another point that I wanted to ask about was under development charges. Again, municipalities will be required to spend at least 60% of the charges of the reserves for priority services. Have you got any comments that you want to make on that? I'm a little concerned about them being quite so specific about that. I mean, I would think that water, wastewater, and roads are priority services that would come with a new development, but I'm assuming that it's those services that are specific to a certain development, not overall in the municipality. So we couldn't take 60% of the development charge reserves and spend them on repairing an existing road.
It would have to be for any improvements that are directly related to a specific development. So if it's an existing road that will be used more as a result of a development, then they could potentially be used towards that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a new road construction.
Okay. Are there any other comments, questions, or concerns? So if you have heard, did you have a comment, Councillor Richards? Mike?
I had a question on the DC and the CBC charges. Is there anything in it, they're talking about the reduction, sorry, of DC charges and that being phased in. Is there any point at which that ends, or does it go on in perpetuity?
I believe there are timelines associated with the reduction in rates for development charges, dependent on the level of affordable housing that's dedicated towards a certain project. So
I
yes.
can see a reduction, you know, in a development that offers affordable housing. But, you know, as far as reducing development charges for a developer for any standard development that doesn't include that, I really take issue with that. Other comments, questions? So have you heard our concerns loud and clearly enough that you could prepare a response to the proposed?
I think I have. The areas where I've highlighted, I'll add some notes that, you know, personal thoughts of mine, specifically with the third-party appeals. I think that's the one that would have the most direct impact on our township. With respect to development charges, we are going through the background study of you know, implementing development charges throughout the county right now. So we'll have to see how these proposed changes will impact that study. It will, I expect, set us back a little bit as far as timelines for that. But overall, yes, I think I have heard comments from council, and I can certainly prepare a response.
And forgive me, I should know the answer to this. Do we have sufficient time to bring that back to look at before you send it out?
For
that would be our December the 8th meeting.
So unfortunately for the proposed changes to the Planning Act, those comments are due by November 24th.
Okay, sorry.
But the comments for natural heritage planning, the wetlands, that is not until December 30th. So yes, I could bring something back to council at the December 8th meeting for
Okay, so if you wouldn't mind, I mean, we'll put our faith in your commenting, you know, on what needs to be done right away, and look to see that come back. You had a comment or question, Councillor Berry?
I knew that the natural heritage had a longer time period, so.
Okay. All right, thank you, Sean. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive that report on Bill 23? Councillor Shortreed, Deputy Mayor Dayu. You have a question? Go ahead.
Is this something that would just be coming from Algonquin Highlands, or would there be more, is the potential that there would be comment in the natural heritage component from the county as well?
Well, the county would get this through to comment on, or we wouldn't necessarily combine our comments.
Okay, but there is potential that they would receive two
Absolutely.
or four.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved, council receives report PL 13022 submitted by Sean O'Callahan and dated November 17th, 2022 regarding Bill 23, or Homes Built Faster Act 2022, and the council directs staff to prepare a letter outlining its comments and concerns related to Bill 23.
All in favor? That's carried. Okay, next is a Shore Road closing for Martinko on Wolf Lake.
Yes, this is an application to close the shore road allowance in front of this property. It is a developed parcel of land. The dwelling right now does appear to encroach onto the shore road allowance, and the applicant is proposing to do some construction work in that area. So they first need to close the shore road allowance. Staff are supportive of the proposal and would recommend that the applicant proceed through the regular process to close that shore road allowance.
Are there any questions on this particular application? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to approve the application in principle? Councillor Shortreed and Barry.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Berry. Be resolved, council receives report PL 12922 regarding proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of lot 18, concession 11, geographic township of Livingston, Wolf Lake. And the council approves in principle application OSRA 2422 made to stop up and close and convey the said shoreline road allowance, and that the applicants are requested to proceed in accordance with the shoreline road allowance closing procedure.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is shore road allowance closing for Blanchette on Maple Lake.
This is another application to close the shore road allowance in front of this property. Again, it is a developed piece of land with the dwelling sitting on the shore road allowance. Nothing of particular note beyond that, and staff would support the application or recommend council support the application in principle and that it proceed through the regular process.
Are there any questions on this application? Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder to approve it in principle? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be resolved, Council receives report PL 12722 regarding proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of Lot 28, Concession 5, Geographic Township of Stanhope, Maple Lake, and Council approves in principle application OSRA 2222 made to stop up closing of the said shoreline road allowance, and that the applicants are requested to proceed in accordance with the shoreline road allowance closing procedure.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, a shore road allowance closing on Bear Lake by Haslam.
So this is another application to close the shore road allowance in front of this property. Again, it is also a developed piece of land with the cottage occupying the shore road allowance. They are looking to do some work to the existing building. So again, need to go through this process first before we can issue any building permits. Staff would recommend the application proceed through the regular process.
Any questions on the application? Could I have a mover and a seconder to approve it in principle? Councillors Barry and Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Berry, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that Council receives report PL 12822 regarding proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of Lot 8, Concession 4, Geographic Township of Livingston, Bear Lake, and the Council approved in principle application OSRA 2322 made to stop up closing of the said shoreline road allowance, and that the applicants are requested to proceed in accordance with the shoreline road allowance closing procedure.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, the Committee of Adjustment minutes from October the 11th. Any questions or comments on the Committee of Adjustment? I just, as a side note, Sean, you might start maybe looking into seeing somebody come and do a bit of a presentation to the new committee once they're put in place, because we definitely will have one new member and maybe more, depending on where we land with the membership of that committee. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the Committee of Adjustment minutes? Councillors Shortreed and Richards. I'm sorry?
Shortreed.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved that Council receives the October 11th, 2022 Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes as information.
All in favor? That's carried. It would only be an issue if Councillor Shortreed had something on the Committee of Adjustment with making an application. So external boards and agencies, I'm not sure if we have any reports. Is there anything on the Dorset Health Hub that we don't know about? I'm sorry, Dorset Partnership I should have started with. I suspect the answer is the same. Nothing, there wasn't anything on Lake Bay ZecDev. I can't really give you anything on the community safety and well-being update at this point in time, or on the library board for that matter. There has been a bit of an announcement from the Eastern Ontario Regional Network about, some tower construction that has commenced, but it's not here yet. So, it doesn't really have a full impact on us, except that they are moving along successfully with their project and will be installing towers here next year, which is good. And is there anything, did the community or county's climate action plan advisory group meet?
If I may, it hasn't met since last time we spoke of it, but Corey has launched the second public engagement process. So that is worthy of council's note as well, to take a look at that.
Okay, thank you. And at what point would we be making the appointments, these liaison appointments at our next meeting? Can we do that?
I'm looking at the clerk, but I'm thinking they would be the same at the January meeting as the committees. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, then we're into general business. And the first item is a bit of correspondence from Ulinks with respect to an application that they're submitting to Environment Canada to do a planting and restoration revitalization projects at municipal either parks or landings. They didn't have time to get a presentation together, delegation together to come and officially ask us, but it sounded like something that we could definitely get behind. Sounds like an exciting opportunity. They're not asking for money. They're just asking for support and for us to help identify a site. And our CAO had suggested, which I thought was an excellent suggestion, that we put that together with sort of combine it with Chris's asset management for docks and landings, that, you know, when he's recommending that a particular site be rehabilitated or you know, improved, that we look at that as a possible site. That sort of makes sense. It's a more of a cooperative approach to it, and helps to identify things. The only complication is the issue of whether or not we actually own the land or not, or whether it's Crown land, and whether we needed Crown approval, or whether we would have to look at another site because we don't own the land that's associated. So, I mean, that will come back to us, but I'm hoping that council at this point can agree to supporting in principle their application so that they can submit for the funding. Any questions or comments? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to approve that? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Barry. So can we get a letter out to them? Sort of pretty quickly. Thank you.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved, council receives correspondence from Mr. Andrew Gordon, Director of Ulinks, requesting support for an application to Eco Action Program funded by Environment Canada for the naturalization of shorelines as public access points and boat launches within the county of Haliburton, and further, the council hereby supports in principle this initiative and application to the ECO Action Program by Ulinks Center for Community-Based Research.
All in favor? That's carried. Next on the agenda is notice of motion. Are there any notice of motions? And you might, I'm not sure, Councillor Richards, if you're familiar with that process, but that's something that you might, follow up with myself or our clerk about how that works and when you might want to use it. It is a mechanism to get something on the agenda that might not normally appear there. But I think, I would recommend you talk to the clerk about that, how that works. Councillor Barry.
Are we doing item B?
Oh, for crying out loud. My apologies. I left out something that's very important. Thanks, ladies. Somebody out there might be shaking their head about that. So you've seen the correspondence from Mike Rutter at the county, sort of outlining what has been going on. Just to kind of recap, we heard some rumblings that there had been a meeting within the OPP structure, that they have been doing some service delivery reviews and looking at how they can better improve and streamline services, which in some ways may be very helpful to us, because I understand that from the conversation that we had with those present, that there would be additional officers assigned to Haliburton, to the Haliburton detachment. But at the same time, they were proposing to remove the detachment commander and go to a sort of a manager's position. And the four mayors were all absolutely horrified by that thought, and asked for a meeting with the OPP, and we did have a meeting on November the 9th, and it was a very frank and open, sometimes angry discussion. And the thinking being that, with so much movement, an increase in our population, demand on services, increased poverty, increased crime. We're hearing stories periodically about the fact that there's one cruiser available in Haliburton County. I mean, that just is not enough, to cover such an expanded area. And we did hear all sorts of rationale from the chief. But it didn't cut it with the mayors, and they're just not happy. The feeling is that we need to have a detachment commander who's familiar with the county and its issues, who is readily accessible and available, understands what those issues are. And, we just feel like it is, or felt like it was something that was like, this is the beginning of a slippery slope, that, there are other services that will be relocated or may be relocated. The example of Cobeconk was brought up several times, that a similar movement was made in Cobeconk, that, they were going to remove detachment command and everything is going to be fine. Your facility is going to remain the same. You're still going to have services here, and it's now an empty building. The mayors were unanimously in agreement that they did not wish to lose their detachment commander. And we did receive assurances that if that's what the municipalities wanted, that there would be no change. And we heard that loud and clear several times. But it's also now my understanding that there's been a bit of backstepping on that. And they're now saying they'll put everything on hold and they won't be making any changes unless and until there is a detachment board established. And I mean, that's something that's being done by a different arm of the government. It's something that's in the province's hands. And although we have received correspondence suggesting that that's in the works, that, what we're proposing to do in Haliburton County is, they've given the nod to, but we don't know exactly how long it would take. And it sounds like possibly the OPP are thinking, well, we're going to turn this over to the board to decide. And we're still wanting to stand strong as four municipalities saying, no, we do not want to change. And have I left anything out? Angie was at the meeting. All of the CAOs, mayors, and myself were at the meeting. And don't think that I missed anything.
No, I think you've got it pretty well covered. The only thing that I would add, I guess, is something that CAO Rutter said was, one of the important things for the request was that because the detachment board has not yet been formed, and the Haliburton County has, with their detachment board, there's representation from all of the municipalities, and there was fear that that may get lost if there was a consolidation. So
That the detachment board would get lost. Well, that remains to be seen. I mean, we really don't, they didn't know, and we really don't know how that's going to fall out. In the meantime, I think that, all four mayors agreed to take this back to their respective councils, seeking concurrence on sending a strong request that no change be made, and holding them to their word. Which I think is very important. I think that the chief superintendent peer, who was actually, it was actually his slip or his comment that got, it kind of got out to the ranks, and I think he's quite angry that happened, and that he's actually somewhat to blame for this happening. But we're glad that we've heard what was being undertaken. We very much took them to task about not having proper communications with all the municipalities and with the county overall to let us know what was happening. You know, they just gave us absolutely no information, no details. And, you know, it's just something that everybody felt very strongly. So I'm hoping that you can support the request that's coming from the county. Councillor Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Very happy to support. And of course, this is of equal importance to all 4 townships. There's no question. But we up here in Algonquin Highlands, we're the furthest away from, you know, from Kawartha Lakes and therefore, in terms of distance and relationships and understanding of space, we, in one small sense, we do stand the most to lose. I think about the problems up at the pit, Livingston Lake Road, and how complicated it was to find that support when people were using the pit as a space to put off their firearms, regardless of the fact that there was a row of cottages there, and to get the attention of a detachment command that is even further away than it is now, would make those sorts of situations precarious for our community up here in Algonquin Highlands, and of course the other 3 townships as well. But we're just a little bit further north.
Well, and I've got to say that the issue of co-policing for both your area and for the Highlands East area, because they have co-policing out of Bancroft as you do out of Huntsville, that would not change. That was definitely my understanding, that would remain in place and that there would be no impact there. But your point well taken. So could I have then a mover and a seconder? Councillor Barry, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, Council receives correspondence from Mike Rutter, CAO Clerk, County of Haliburton, regarding OPP Consolidated Command of Haliburton Highlands and the City of Kawartha Lakes detachments concepts, and that Council concurs with the recommendation made in the said correspondence and rejects the Consolidated Command concept, and further that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the County of Haliburton Chief Superintendent Dwight Peer and Commissioner Thomas Carrick.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We already covered the notice of motion issue. So next up is correspondence. And I recognizing that we have not had any requests for support in advance of this, but you know, our process with the changeover and the new council and inaugural meeting, I did ask for, in particular, a motion to be prepared with respect to Bill 3, which is the bill giving mayors extraordinary powers. It seems strange that a mayor would be so opposed to that. But I just think that is a very, very frightening step to make. I see that, you know, it's starting with Toronto and Ottawa. It'll probably then go to places like Kingston and London and Belleville, and it sounds like further on down the line. And to give a single individual the capability to hire and fire, you know, top level staff, to have them in fact set the budget for the municipality, to have them have the ability to veto a decision that's made by council, to me, just simply destroys the democratic process overall. And I would like us to write a letter in strong opposition to that bill. If, you know, I would like to hear what council's thoughts are. But you know, I think it would be appropriate for us to do something about that. Any comments? Deputy Mayor Dayu?
Fully agree. I think the checks and balance system that we have with a weak mayoral system is the right way to go for Ontario. Certainly, you can see how damaging a strong mayoral system without a corresponding check and balance system can be in certain places in the States. So I fully agree with your recommendation.
I'm sure I agree with the weak mayors. But that's good. Good. Any other thoughts or concerns about that? So could I have a mover and a seconder to write a letter of opposition? Deputy Mayor Dayu and Councillor Barry.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved, Council supports the municipality of Huron Shores Resolution 22-24-16 regarding its opposition to Bill 3, which is described as an act to amend various statutes with respect to special powers and duties of heads of council, and further that a copy of this resolution be sent to the municipality of Huron Shores, the Premier of Ontario, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario.
All in favor? That's carried. I also had yeah, I'm not quite finished with the correspondence. Then we'll do that. That's all right. I did have a thought about whether or not we wanted to write a further letter about about AMO's unpacking Bill 23, but I suspect that through our comments that we made to Sean earlier that we've handled that. We're all in agreement with that. Okay. So could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the correspondence summary listing? Councillor Richards, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Richards, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that council receives on November 17th, 2022 correspondence listing for information.
All in favor? That's carried. We have no closed session today, and we appear to have miscalculated our timing, but we'll have lunch anyway. So under bylaws, the first bylaw is to appoint our new deputy CBO and approve his job description. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that resolution? Are we doing one for both? Okay, so it's a mover and a seconder for both that bylaw and the electronic monitoring policy. Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved that the following bylaws be received and read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed. 2022-111 being a bylaw to appoint a deputy CBO bylaw enforcement officer, Jeff Lewis. 2022-112 being a bylaw to adopt an electronic monitoring policy.
All in favor? That's carried. And could I have a mover and a seconder to approve the confirming bylaw? Councillor Shortreed and Barry.
By Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Barry. Be resolved that bylaw 2022-113 being a bylaw to confirm the proceeding council held during its November 17th regular meeting be received and read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, could I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn? Councillor Richards, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Richards, second by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be resolved, council hereby adjourns its meeting at 11:35 a.m.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, council. I think we did fairly well for our first regular meeting, hopefully. Just the odd glitch.